there's another book, I think is James Coast wrote it, or I think it's his name, but it's Infinite Games, Finite Games, Games Thinkers Play. And the theory of the book is small-minded people view everything as a finite game. At the end of the game, you go, you're a loser, and I won. Complex thinkers realize that there are infinite games and that you need to have everybody save face. And therefore, you need to respect them in the deal. So I think that in terms of this sort of work, whether it's private or public, you need to be really thinking about, and I say this not in some sort of like, I want to give everybody a hug and a pony and make everything better, but you really need to actually care about the person in front of you. If they know you actually care about them, you can ask them to do anything. Mm-hmm. But they need to know that you actually have their interest in heart. And that doesn't mean ruining your own interest or sacrificing yourself or martyrdom or any of these other pieces or giving people false hope. But you really need to, I think, move from a place of respect and engagement with them. And then you can achieve anything as a group.
Everybody, welcome back. I am with an old friend, Dave Panagore, who is the former town manager of Provincetown. And we are live we're recording live in Provincetown, overlooking, what would you call this, the harbor?
This is the Inner Harbor, I guess.
Inner Harbor, right next to Captain Jack's Wharf. We have a retreat here. And Dave lives here, and I've been a friend with his a while. And I said, I got to do a podcast with him because he's always very interesting. And I love your post. You have a way you write that's very unique. It's almost like, I don't know, it's like you almost write in poetry.
Sure, I do.
Is that intentional, or is that just how you write?
I know. Well, I believe that. I mean, the spoken word and the written word are incredibly important to me, and I believe that poetry is the cognac of language.
Oh, interesting.
And so, what you're always working on, and I think that humans think in story and metaphor, and so I'm always consciously working on my metaphor, my simile, my imagery. But I think it's also informed nowadays by my years studying postmodern thought, and where everything is a hashtag, right?
Oh, right.
Everything is a concept.
Right.
And when everything becomes a concept, you then can use words in poetry in a different way.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because I love reading when you have a post. I pull it up and I'm like, oh my God, it's like you really thought a lot about this, and I think through. I read it a few times, so I really appreciate your content. It's really good. I'm curious, like, is Dave the email guy, like at work and we'll get to what you do now in the private sector. Do you write like that in emails, or do you have a different persona there?
Well, one is I do believe that every environment requires a different set of clothes. And so I do write differently in different places, but the common theme, I think, is attempting with voice always to be moving from an open heart into moving respectfully. But clearly in my posts, I'm more, I would argue, like more of a romanticist, more of an imagery type thing. Whereas in my work, I'm more of a precise scientist who is trying to dissect a body.
Interesting. Yeah, I could see that. I mean, because, there's all these, I joke with a lot of my friends that are consultants, and they have all this consultant speak, like I'll circle back or, all that horse shit. And that sort of gets old. And I think appreciate somebody who was a CEO, a type who would, make me think a little deeper and, but sometimes the occasion, you're right, you need different clothes. Sometimes somebody just needs to know, hey, do this. And you can't get too poetic with that.
But I do think, to your point, you should always be quoting. I mean, not quoting, you should always be coaching.
Right.
But I think the other piece of it is, when I was working in San Jose at one point, we had a director there who was incredibly strong on removing government speak from government or consulting speak and getting you to say the same thing in plain language.
Right.
Which is not, though, to say who doesn't enjoy a vague biz, wonky word, circle back at the end of the day. I recall, though, that I love playing with them. I don't necessarily respect them. They're useful. But I remember one time when I started the job, I told the folks there, let's run that up the flagpole and see if the cat licks it up. And about 15 people in the room, and somebody in the back room raises their hand and says, you can't do that. And I said, what? And he's like, you mixed your
Metaphors.
And I said, I just did, and you all knew exactly what I meant. So I think my point got across. But that sort of obsessive religious following of these manners and rules, I think is ridiculous.
It is. We just saw another one. Julie and I gave the guy a hard time. He said, we're going to bubble this up internally. And then I wrote back to him and I said, here's one for you. When you start a meeting, I want you to say, okay, allow me to curate the space. Like, fuck you, dude.
Oh, if I could,
you got to use that.
I love these. I'd love to use that one.
Let me curate the space.
One of my favorites that it's like it's like fingernails on a chalkboard, is the word "juge." Use it a lot in theater.
That's old.
Yeah, but it's one of those ideas. It's still, we're gonna zhuzh it up. That one gets me.
Yeah, that's a little too that seems like too, I don't know, that. So, all right, I want to talk to you about a bunch of things, and I got to try to keep my head straight because you have such interesting stuff. And I love the fact that you're a guy that runs things, and I love that because, a lot of life and being, having some financial success, but also success as in a family, in a relationship, is about getting things done. And so you're obviously a professional getter things done guy, and that's a skill. And so I want to talk to you about, and of course the theme throughout this podcast is relationships. And I want to talk to you about, you're a Massachusetts kid, right? You grew up in Mass, right? You have some siblings.
I'm a native son.
Native son.
Because I've lived and worked.
Where were you born?
I made sure over the course of time I've actually lived and worked in every corner of Massachusetts.
Wow.
But I was born and raised in Marlborough, Mass, in Central Mass, which I believe is one fruit or farm cart ride between Boston and Worcester. So you'd take the horse and buggy out, and at night you'd land in Marlborough, and then you get to Worcester the next day.
I love that.
So I think that's about the distance.
So you're born there, siblings?
Yeah. Siblings. I have 4 in the family.
Right.
One is the oldest. Andrea was an artist, and she passed away over a decade ago.
Okay.
It's not that my family are the Glass children, but it's close. My oldest sister, the artist, passed away. My next sibling is a sister. She, very quiet publicly, but she was the assistant city solicitor of Marlborough. She is a attorney. She is a registered architect. She plays the fiddle.
Wow.
She has an EMT, and she's also an accomplished painter and watercolorist. And that's just off the top of my head.
And she lives in Marlborough still?
And she lives in Milford.
Oh, Milford, Mass. Yeah.
And then my brother, Peter, he's a minister, ex-minister now. He went to Yale, and he is now very strongly, and he's out in public talking about it, his near-death experiences, and he does a lot of coaching and a lot of online presence about near-death experience, which is certainly a growing piece in the country. So those are those are the 4 siblings, and then my youngest sister, Melissa. They live in Rhode Island, and she's a hairstylist, and she's probably one of the glues that holds the family together.
Wow. So that, and they, and then were you an intact family growing up?
Oh yes.
Yeah, mother, father,
parents.
What did they do?
My dad passed away a couple of years ago. My dad was came from the neighborhoods. Didn't speak English till the 2nd grade.
What did he speak?
Greek. Children of immigrants. And he then went to Boston Architectural Center. Became a registered architect. He was a draftsman. Became a registered architect. Wound up being president of the New England Council of Architects. Designed many of the courthouses in Massachusetts, all of the schools pretty much of the 60s and 70s in Marlborough, and ran the Marlborough Urban Renewal Authority in the 70s and did economic development. And it's where my sister picked up her architecture, and it's where I picked up my love and work for urban design and urban development. And my mother was she originally was a practicing nurse. She then spent well over a decade as a special needs teacher. But her hallmark on the community was, as over 20 years, I believe, as chair of the Marlborough Public Library, and made substantial improvements to theater grounds and collections. So
this all makes sense now.
Mm-hmm.
It does. What? So you went there through high school in Marlborough?
No. I went to elementary school in Marlborough. But as with many communities in the United States, it is the middle school where challenges occur in the local education system.
Interesting.
And so I got the opportunity and a scholarship to go to a private school in Southborough, and I went to a private school for 2 years in Southborough, and then I went to a private school in Worcester.
Was it like a religious school?
As with most ancient New England schools, there is some affiliation, so it is Episcopalian.
Episcopalian.
Yep, but more preppy Yankee Brahmin than
The Episcopalians have always been okay with gays, though.
Yeah, I mean, as was said,
modern times.
As was said to them by the minister, he said at the time to me, he said, the essential difference is that Roman Catholics have guilt and Episcopalians have picnics.
That's hilarious.
So yeah, and then, but my high school was a Catholic high school. It was, well, I think it was the finest high school education in the region, St. John's.
St. John's.
Yeah.
So you do that. When at some point, obviously, you're a gay man. When did you?
Some people would say it's not obvious.
It's not obvious. Well, I mean, I know you, but I mean, I don't know how you would tell. I mean, look, some people you could tell, but other people you can't. Just like you could, people draw conclusions by how people comport themselves and whatnot. But I would agree that it would be, if somebody didn't have a finely tuned gaydar, they would have a hard time picking you out.
Yeah, it made it hard at various points in time to even pick up a date.
Because they're like, what? You're like a straight, like you're like a dad, like from like a hetero dad from like middle Massachusetts.
It was very much like, you're not gay.
No, great, because you present like a middle-aged dad guy, like that's just he's got the wife and they're driving here from for a day trip, and they're staying in Chatham.
I'll take that as a compliment.
No, there's something good with that. But when did you when did you start living outwardly gay?
I in the closet, more probably in modern terms, more probably pansexual.
Right.
In college.
Yeah. And where was that?
UMass Amherst.
Oh, UMass Amherst. Okay.
Yeah, UMass Amherst. And my best friend, I fell in love with my best friend. He fell in love with me. But we were down low, closeted lovers for probably off and on for 30 years.
Wow.
He had 2 marriages in between.
To men or women?
Women.
Okay.
And it didn't end well. It didn't end well. Because at the end of the day, his ability to be honest about who he was ran up against his childhood and other things.
That's too
and
bad.
so I had to walk away from that about 10 years ago.
That probably broke your heart.
More than broke my heart. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So, but now, how did it go at some point when you say, "Mom, Dad, I'm gay"?
Terribly. For wonderful people who we were raised very Massachusetts Democrat.
You couldn't have had like a better
properly Massachusetts progressive liberal. But I remember once in college that there was a letter of mine that I'd written to Brian, the man I just mentioned, and it wasn't overly, but it was a love letter. And my mom just handed it back to me and said, "I think this is yours." Oh. So at that point in time, I thought, all right, okay, some cat's out of the bag. And then literally it wasn't until I was 27, I think. And it was every single time I think of telling them, there's an excuse not to. The cat got sick. The milkman arrived.
Horseshit stuff, yeah.
And so I finally decided there was no good time. So over Christmas, I told my mom in the kitchen.
In your childhood home.
In the childhood home. And she responded not angrily, but she responded emotionally upset. Ran to the bottom of the staircase, called out for my dad, and said, and my dad came running down the stairs, and my dad said, "What have you done to my wife?" Which sort of put me clearly.
Wait, well, let's stop that. That's a weird response. Mm-hmm. My wife, not your mother. Mm-hmm. He must have known or something. That's like a. Mm-hmm. That's like, because like you say that to like if you were a salesman that came in from the front door, and like he's like, all right, I got to go upstairs, go to the bathroom or something, and then like and his wife started crying or whatever. Like that to me is like that must have like that shakes me a little bit.
Well, it definitely sort of told me in that moment, in that emotional moment, where I was in the pecking order, which was not in the pecking order anymore. Oof. But look, it was it it had to be a shock, no matter what. Somehow, I mean, in
What
spite
year
of
is
everything,
this?
this is 1990,
Okay.
something like that. You would, given the environment, given everything else, you would think there would be more awareness, but clearly it was, and life was not Ozzie and Harriet, but in that sense, it was sort of like bringing them color. It was like colorizing Ozzie and Harriet. It was like, you know what I mean? It was like introducing something to the suburban life that they just hadn't seen before in their own lives. They knew of it in other people's, but in their own family, it was a challenge. It took them a period in time. It took my siblings and my parents a period in time to adjust. And often, for a period of years, they really made sure to be saying things like, sending me articles in support of X or in support of Y, and showing that they were supportive. But it was it wasn't the worst moment, but it wasn't a great moment. But over the course of time, you have to have understanding of people, and you can't expect that people are going to start where you are. And it's really where they finish and not where they begin. Because if I judged everybody by their initial reaction to anything, you'd never get anywhere.
Oh, same with me. I mean, where did he finish, your dad, on this issue?
Yeah. Oh no, my dad and mom were wonderfully supportive. I remember, it was 2004, and I was considering moving back from California because I had this unique opportunity to work for Springfield. And I was going to go live north of Springfield, near Greenfield, with Brian. And my dad, and I said, I don't know if I should do this. My dad said to me, look, I don't know much. I don't fully understand you. He says, but I know this. You are never happier than when you're with Brian. So he said, if you want to be happy, you have to make the move.
But that's almost as good as it gets.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I would think. Mm-hmm. That's certainly better than what had you done to my wife. Mm-hmm. So that's a progression. And then, and by the time he died, was he like fully in like?
Oh no!
Was he marching pride parades? No. You never got him there.
My father, I marched in one pride parade. Okay, I spent most of the other prides in the back of the Eagle in Boston, playing pool during Pride.
All right,
but I remember the first time, which is not to gainsay it, but the first time I remember standing quietly on the sidelines. I was working for the mayor of Boston. I remember quietly standing on the sidelines of a gay pride parade. And there was somebody in the parade, and of course, more than likely being 27 or something, it was the fact that whoever it was in the parade was kind of cute was part of the motivation. But it was sort of like, come on in. And so I stepped out onto the pavement, and then I walked in the parade. And it was like the largest small step I'd ever made publicly. Never did it again. Didn't really need to. My last job was the MBTA. Helped form the MBTA gay and lesbian employee group. But no, my family's never really been marchers for anything.
You're almost like the middle Massachusetts, almost like the British, right? You don't not too much emotion, steady Eddie, right? Yeah.
But believes that you vote the right way,
correct?
Right. And clearly, my mother being English and Irish, her family goes back hundreds of years in New England. Clearly, that we were raised on Masterpiece Theater and only PBS programming. So the idea of being reserved was just part of the came with the furniture.
So when you did that walk, what year was that? Maybe
that was I believe that probably was 1989, 1990.
And you were in a polo shirt and shorts?
No.
You were in like Pride?
No. I was one at the time. I probably weighed about 185 and was benching about 350.
Oh, all right. So you were shirt off.
Yeah. I, at that point, I was headed to a decade of the circuit party.
All right, there you go. All right, so you were hot and young.
Yeah. It was more so that motif.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah.
All right, so you did that, and that was that was what year again?
About 1990.
90. Okay, which still wasn't like, it's obviously Massachusetts, but it didn't. You didn't have the acceptance. I
Well,
think in the strength you
So
did now.
I went to law school that same time, and I
And
went
where
to
was that?
Suffolk Law.
Suffolk Law.
And I will tell you, I was the first law student in Suffolk Law to come out.
Wow.
Yes.
That's what people don't realize. Like that's the modern era.
Yeah.
Like this isn't like now it's just and I think it's great. And I don't mean this is like disrespectful. It's like we take it for granted, like as it should be.
There's a glory to it being forgotten.
Yes.
And there's a value to the fact that it's forgotten. But at the same time, you do want to remember that it is within our lifetimes.
Yeah.
No, because I had that first one there. I went to work in 2001. I moved to California. I was working in San Jose, 60 miles from San Francisco. And I was the first out gay person at the Redevelopment Authority.
It's crazy to me.
And one day we were clearing out a building of some sort, and they came back with some sort of size 13, 11, high heels. And it was the immediate assumption that because I was gay,
he wore women's clothes.
I wore women's clothes. Like here I am 60 miles from San Francisco, and they don't even understand the complexity of human identity and human sexuality in presentation. So yeah, that was and if I may as well, when before that in 1996. I started working for the mayor of Boston, and I was stunned even working there that being a gay male, there was known people were gay, but the idea that a gay male could get things done and run a large-scale public urban development project, that was not commonly accepted. I mean, it was still hairstylists and interior designers. Somebody who's wearing boots, a hard hat, kicking ass and taking names.
Right, couldn't be gay. Right.
Yeah. So
wow.
I
want to back you up because I always ask this question to some of my closest gay friends too. When did little Dave or maybe not, but were you like, I'm different? Like,
well, no.
Did you have that moment?
Oh, sure. I mean, I had that moment when I was like 1.5, 2, but it didn't relate to being gay.
Oh.
It related to being me.
Oh, interesting. No, but was there a moment though, like when you had memories where you were like I have for instance, my oldest friend I've known since I was 6 months old, my friend Todd. I remember my earliest memory of him. I know him since 3 months old. He's married to a man now in Windsor. Hey, Todd. I remember we had if you remember before there was the internet, you used to find somebody, I'm sure you had this experience in New England, somebody buried some pornography out in the woods. And it was always like, and somebody would come with me and they'd show you like a picture and you'd be like, whatever. And it was, but we had the Sears catalog.
Oh, yeah.
Right? That's all you had for material.
We also had the members only catalog.
No, but I remember looking through it and there's like women in girdles for me.
Sure, the bras.
And I'm like, oh my God, this is so great. And I remember he turned to the men in Speedos, and I remember him kissing the pictures. At a very young age.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
wow,
and it didn't like, I didn't know what it was, because you don't know sexuality, you're 7, 8 years old. But now, of course, it all connects in. I'm like, so he had that moment where he's like drawn like a moth to a flame.
That's an amazing moment. I didn't. I believed and more than likely and I don't know what the modern term is, but also mine is far more intellectual,
right?
That sort of mental sexuality.
Yeah.
So I just thought, and I went to an all-male high school, etc. I just thought I had really, 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 really strong, deep friendships with my male friends.
Okay.
It wasn't until, and it literally, I got to tell you, I was in my summer of my first year headed into college. I was working a night job as a guard at a state pool.
I saw a movie like this once.
Oh yeah, no, it's sort of.
This is right.
It's sort of like that. The lifeguards coming in at midnight, all this other stuff.
Oh, do you have a towel?
but another buddy of mine, a friend of friends who we all were in the same friend group, he was not working days and I wasn't working days, so we'd start hanging out, and I go over to his house, and he kept being in various states of undress, telling me he had to get dressed, right? And then one day I go upstairs with him and he's getting dressed, and he makes a pass at me, and I said to him, "Should we be doing this?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Cool." And that was it. That's all that was it. And I moved on from there. By the time I got to college, I was fooling around with him, but it was more so the way when I came out to my friends, They were just like, yeah, that's just Panny. That's just you. Like a sense of like.
Oh, Panny. That's
that was my nickname.
Panny.
My nickname in high school was Panny, and it was more so like. You're always larger than life. You're always, breaking the rules. You're always doing so. This is just another thing that you're doing, and so then through college, I didn't really. I mean, I kept it quiet in some ways, but I really didn't. You didn't need to keep it quiet at all at UMass. Who you slept with?
Right. But were you? Did you do the whole have a beard? Like, did you have women?
Oh God, no. I did actually have. I had a lovely girlfriend the first year of college.
Oh, all right. So all right.
She wasn't, and there was another woman that I was deeply attracted to. That one was more so it looks right. But I wouldn't call it a beard. I just would call it a failed relationship. But no, I never wound up after that hiding it. But I never wound up. It was
right. You didn't do it because you felt like you had to put a.
Yeah, no. I just saw somebody who was hot, and I was like, I want you.
Fair. All right. So you do that. So then law school comes. Do you sit for the bar? Do you ever take the bar?
I did. I took the bar. I was probably one of the luckiest bar participants that year. Because I'd done an internship the last year and a half in the city of Chelsea, which was bankrupt. I've actually worked in the law department. I did all this stuff. I was the nerd who read the 3 books of the Massachusetts Practice on Municipal Law cover to cover.
Of course, that was covered at the bar.
Right. No, it wasn't just covered. 4 out of the 6 questions.
You annihilated it.
Right? 4 out of the 6
the
questions.
guy's like, what? How did you get
all about municipal law and all about at the time that we recently enacted Mass Tort Claims Act, which limits and allows lawsuits against the state government. So so the bar was easy, but and for me tough, but easy. To your point though, I then went on vacation for a month in Amsterdam. And I remember trying to go to, it was called the It Club. It's a giant pink club in Amsterdam at the time. I remember trying to get in on gay night, and the guy didn't want me to go in because he's like, you're not gay. And I had to say to him, what do you want to do? Get down on my knees? I mean, like, how do I prove this?
How do you prove that you have a card? You don't have a card.
Yeah, I don't have a card. Sorry, I forgot my gay card at home. So it was like that. Yeah.
You have to. What do you have to? You have to ask. What's the question? Who is Julie Garland's daughter?
Yeah. So there's got to be an in question. And also, I'm not. The only reason I know show tunes is because I spent 10 years working in theater, and I was forced operating a follow spot to watch the music. I don't know it because I grew up as a child loving musical theater. I had to do it as a job.
Right. So you couldn't answer like how many minutes are there in the Rent in a song?
No.
Wow. So you sit for the bar, and then do you practice law at all?
I did for a year and a half. I left the city of Chelsea as chief legal counsel.
Wait, right out of law school?
Yeah,
chief legal counsel?
Yeah. I actually.
How did you pull that off?
Well, one in any if you ever want to do stuff, go to an organization in crisis because they'll usually let you do stuff that you are not capable of doing.
That's good advice.
But run to that fire. But so I had been assistant personnel director. Assistant to the director of operations, assistant city solicitor, and I passed the bar. And
who knows better than you? Here you go, kid.
I knew the city. I knew everything that was going on, and the statement was, "We'll hire an outside law firm to handle actual litigation."
Oh, right. Okay.
So I was more so, and you'll do all the in-house stuff. So they took a flyer on me. The state did, and they had confidence, and I did that. Probably, as I say, for about a year and a half, maybe 2 years as chief legal counsel. And then after that, I got a job opportunity to go to work for the mayor of Boston. I went to Boston.
That's crazy. You gave some good advice in there. I know you said it quickly, but that's a really run to the fire.
Yeah,
that's a good way
particularly in internships and things like that.
Right, because they'll let you do anything. It's true. You're like, shit, we're burning the ground. Hey, grab a bucket.
Right. No, that was entirely what it was like.
And you can get some great experience that way.
I'm a second year law student, and I spent that summer privatizing the entire DPW. My first job there was privatizing the entire DPW in Chelsea and issuing probably 35 RFPs and managing 35 RFPs and creating the procurement department and creating the DPW. As my first project.
And we'll get to some of your other interesting jobs, but I always get the sense from you that you deeply believe in government and its ability to deliver for its citizens, right? I mean, I think you're a big fan of it, and I am too.
Yeah. Well, so I'd say that in my childhood, Watergate really factors strong. I was about in the 5th, 6th grade, and it was and I come to a family that's interested in public service. So I do start there, a family that believes in public service. But what it was for me was Nixon let the country down and let people's faith in government. And I do think that since that point in time, since Vietnam and the Nixon presidency, that faith that government will tell you the truth, or the faith that government is there to help you, that really started pulling out the underpinnings and the foundation. So for me, I firmly believe we need to show and tell the public that government can be a force for good, and there are honorable people who keep their word. And the only way in our society now, frankly, in my opinion, to counteract the massive ravages of late, post-capitalism, right, in this technocracy which we now live in, is good government, equitable service.
But how do we, I mean, what's going on, under the Trump administration? What's happening now? Like, Dave, it's fucking bizarro world, man. Like,
Yes.
From working with people and the dignity that comes with being a public servant and how important of it is, and people rely on the government for so many things, and how good they can do. And you have this, like, forget, like, okay, you disagree with abortion and all that. Okay, we can talk about fundamental differences like we've had with people in the past. But to be just somebody who acts so undignified, so unethically, so illegally, I mean, how the fuck what do we do?
No, honestly, my opinion is this is Dante's Inferno, and you have to go through the last rung of hell before you come out the other side.
Yeah.
We like to believe in progress, but if you really look at history, New York was incredibly accepting of gays in 1924, and then look what happened.
Yeah.
So cyclically, you would like to believe that every generation likes to believe that they'd made a permanent fix, until the realization is it's only a moment in time and a turn of the wheel. So I don't really have a lot of positive feelings, to be honest. But I that doesn't mean you don't individually still do everything you can, because I think that at the end of the day, what makes people's lives miserable in many ways is not the foreign policy related to some country. It's that your trash wasn't picked up in the morning.
That's right.
Okay, and if we can do the simple things of making people's lives easier and better, supporting their education, supporting their health, picking up their trash in the morning, if we can do those things and create a better life, because I spent a lot of time working on the Chelsea schools, and one of the greatest things I think I've done in my career for education is the number of schools I've been part of building. And because it was said to me a long time ago, kids know what you think of them by the school you send them to. And if you're sending them to a public school that has holes in the gymnasium and the whole thing is broken down, they think that's what they think of you. So, and I know you've talked about a purpose in this podcast is relationships.
Yeah.
I think it is both individual and societal. And what is our relationship with our kids? What is our relationship with our community? And I think that we're lacking in that regard at a community level now. Not what's my relation with my kid.
Right.
What's my relation with all the kids in the community? We're giving all the kids in the community what I would want to give my own kid. And instead we have created rules and camps about what's allowed in education, what's not. And we try and impose these superstructures. I do think that societally, what you're saying, right, the lack of ethics and the problems and all this other stuff is because in this society, people who don't follow the rules don't seem to be punished, and they seem to be rewarded. It undercuts the whole thing. But when you get down at a local government level, what boggles my mind nowadays is we have ideological fights about trash collection. We have about stuff that we shouldn't have an ideological fight about. Giving kids a free lunch in school because they don't have any food at home. I mean, for God's sake, what happens to us as a society?
Right. If America can't do that, yeah.
Right. So
but they can give huge, corporate tax cuts to the wealthiest of the wealthy, and you can't give somebody $3 for a meal. I don't understand. I don't know.
The Kurt Anderson, right? used to host Studio. Was it Studio 360? I think he did. He wrote a book recent. He wrote a piece in the last 10 years called "Haywire." What went wrong with America. It's a brilliant sociological history of the country, and he starts with the statement that from the beginning, we're a country where everybody believed they had their own sense of facts.
Yeah.
Right. Because the Puritans were like, yeah, I know you got this organized religion, but we're going to have our own set of facts. And you move that forward through time, and he goes through all of American history about our faith in conspiracy theory, our faith that we can create our own set of facts, and we don't. The objective truth is whatever we define it to be. Is a through line through all of American history until you get to the 1960s and 70s, when the internet, connectivity, and he will argue progressivism was not just a fire on the left, but was kerosene on the right. And so the Birch Society and people like that, who only used to be able to communicate through newsletter, can now communicate through Facebook group. So the argument is that this has always been a thread in the American psyche. It's just now on steroids and gasoline.
Well, and
how close did Father Coughlin come?
Well, it's crazy. I just read somewhere, I forgot, it was the Washington Post or something, and somebody suggested that most people don't know this, but most of the postings on Instagram or Facebook are foreign intelligence operations. To bots, Russian bots, Chinese bots that are looking to stir trouble
in incredibly psychops ways, right? Because they don't come right out.
They get and the algorithms, it fuels your, it's an echo chamber, and it just builds on it. And my uncle in California is like this. He sends he sends me these things, and I'm like, they literally sits home with my cousin all day, and they watch Fox News, and he sends me these articles. I'm like, this isn't true. Like, where did you get this? Oh, I saw this on Facebook. I'm like, what? Like, where are you getting your information? And it's it's a Russian farm bot who's just sowing discontent.
But the thing that gets me now, though, is you can have that at a larger level. But what stuns me is when it breaks up communities. You read about I was reading one article, and I think it was probably in the Times, about a Republican town clerk somewhere in the Western United States, where she's been a Republican. She's lived in the community her entire life. She's been a Republican in this job for like 17, 18 years, and she's now being accused of being part of some vast left-wing conspiracy. It's the same person that you went, to church service with or the bake sale. And it's when it reaches now at the community level, at the local government, because that's where I want to live, is where the direct provision of services are. It's insane. Because I argued for most of my career, there wasn't a Republican or a Democratic way of collecting trash.
That's right. You just get it done.
A cost-effective, cheap way to do it.
And who's, and I want to get to some of the other stuff you did, but the guy who really got a lot of popularity was Governor Shapiro in Pennsylvania. When that tanker fell over and burned down 95. That guy just snapped to it, and he says, "We're going to do this in 2 fucking weeks." And he made it happen. And he went out there and he paid everybody and he gave everyone you can do it. I'm like, if they can do that in 2 weeks, we've been fighting on 95 forever. I'm like, this is a guy, he's a boss. He went out there and he said, I'm not going to make it so you have traffic jams. Give me 2 weeks and I'll get this done. And he got it done.
Yeah, so the thing is,
it's wildly popular.
Well, but in a circumstance like that, there are provisions already in the law that allow for emergency work.
Sure.
Stuff like 95, et cetera. Look, we did a great job in the 1970s in response to urban renewal in the 60s, in the 50s, which said, I'm going to build a highway through your city, and we're going to hold one public meeting for half an hour, right? So then we get to the early 70s, and we get, it was actually one of the, again, people don't realize how progressive the Nixon administration was as compared to modern republicanism. He actually was part of the creation of the Federal Environmental Review Act called NEPA. So we create these federal, and then Connecticut, California, Massachusetts, New York, they all have an environmental review process. So to get plans through the Connecticut Department of Transportation, it's 2 years to get the plans through.
Right.
So left to its own devices, right? I think we all know this. Left to its own devices, bureaucracies always metastasize. They always get bigger. They always want to create more rules, more control, more growth, which slows everything down. And it's only in these rare circumstances where you have a terrible emergency that allows you to cut through all the red tape that we've all created. We've done this to ourselves. We've made it so that to be able to execute a project in the United States, it's 20 or 30 years.
Wow. So your work in California is, you go from California back to Massachusetts?
Yeah, I was in Chelsea, and then I got the opportunity to run the largest urban renewal project at the time, and probably still is, in New England, the building of the Boston Convention Center, which was a massive environmental remediation, permitting, tenant relocation, demolition, site preparation, design review, while the Convention Center Authority built the building. We did all the upfront work. I did that for several years, about 96 to 2000. And then in about 2000, I went to California to work for the San Jose Redevelopment Authority as a senior project manager there, and then did urban renewal in California during the .com for 4 or 5 years.
And then shot back to...
And then I got a phone call that from
Hartford.
I got a phone call from the governor's office in Massachusetts for Springfield.
Oh, right. That's right. You did
and
that.
So I worked on the Springfield recovery for about 4 years. Then I get the call to come to Hartford. Did Hartford, and then the then mayor and I helped. I basically, it's an odd little moment in Connecticut history. When I was brought in, I believe, essentially as a white knight, and when the then mayor Eddie Perez went on trial, I didn't see Eddie for at least a year.
So it was you.
And so the city charter states if the mayor is in electronic communication with the CAO, he is deemed not to have abandoned his office. So I was in vague communication with Eddie and his chief of staff, but essentially for a year and a half, I was running the city, and I was the director of development at the same time. And then new mayor came in. I helped him form his cabinet. I worked for him for about a year.
Who was that?
It was Pedro Segura.
Who's now a judge?
Who's now an administrative law judge.
No, a judge.
Oh, he
just got appointed to Superior Court. Yeah.
Oh,
He
congratulations!
just got signed in like a month ago. He just got sworn in.
Congratulations to Pedro for that. He and I mean, things you don't do is essentially, to be honest, be more popular with people than your mayor.
It's like wearing white to a wedding.
It was, and it was nothing I could solve. But he and I had a split, and it didn't fare well for the people that he chose to go with. And I know that Pedro moved on after losing the next election. It's a little bit of a sore point for me, but I know that, I mean, I've seen Pedro here in Provincetown, and we've made our peace. But I only tried to do right by the city.
No, you did. Well, and then of course you get the job of a lifetime for a gay man. I would think is this to run Provincetown.
Yeah,
I remember you told me you got that, and you were just like on top of the world. You're like,
it was amazing.
I mean, it's like that's it. I mean, like, where do I go from here?
It was amazing. I really valued the opportunity to move here and become part of a community that I always admired. It is running Provincetown is like running a improv theater where the curtain goes up every day. You don't know what's going to happen in the show. You may make the New York Times, you may not.
You'll figure it out.
But it'll happen, and so for 3 or 4 months you get this massive attention and focus, and then you have a quiet 6 months or so, and they get to the shoulders. But it was an amazing job, but it is really, really challenging, particularly the way that my select board wanted me to do it, which was to be very, very engaged. And so I ran in Hartford, a great Facebook group, Downtown Dwellers.
Oh yeah, I'm still a member of that.
Right,
yeah.
that really was a leading edge of creating the downtown as a place. I tried to repeat that here in Provincetown, and the people's perspectives on freedom of expression are very different, and rule following. So the greatest thing I would argue about Provincetown is our respect for freedom of speech. The greatest problem in Provincetown is our respect for individual freedom of speech, meaning no one needs to compromise. Everyone wants to be in on the decision, and there is no compromise. So it makes it a very tough job.
Wow.
And I always feel for anybody who's in that job.
So what? So with all, and now obviously, then you went to the again public sector. You're in the MBTA, right? You did
Yes, I
that?
went to the MBTA, Boston's transit authority, the fourth largest transit system in the country.
What was your title there?
I got another call, as I do about every decade, from the governor's office saying the T is in trouble and it needs you. And we need you to come on board as the chief administrative officer and be in charge of basically anything that doesn't move or roll. So all the back of house operations. So I ran all the back of house operations at the MBTA for 5 years.
Wow. And now you're back in the private sector, running another transportation company.
Yep. No. The chairman of my board in Provincetown, an extraordinary person. His name is Raphael Richter. He is a clear, true entrepreneur, and we've known each other now for almost 10 years. And it was around Christmas this year. I was reaching the point where I knew I wanted to eventually leave the T. And he called me up and said, I'm looking for a new COO, and I'd like you to consider coming to work for me. And I said, great. We talked about it, and the rest is so far history. It's been about a little over 3 months that I've been in the private sector. It is a world of difference. But what I'm eternally grateful for is the change in lifestyle. Many people now, I have one, my variable heart meter on my wrist.
Does it say it's over 100 anymore?
Well, no, it doesn't. And it actually sent me a note the other day that said, what has gone on in your life?
Did you have a heart attack?
No, because your ability to cope with stress has increased by measuring how much your heart rate varies each day from your mean heart rate,
Right.
how many times it happens. My ability, which is an indication of your ability to cope with stress, my ability to cope with stress has increased by 30%.
Jesus.
30%. And that's the difference between that high pressure job and being able to have a job in the private sector. I just say this, for folks who either ride the MTA or the MBTA or any of these public systems, they are the most extraordinary, smartest group of people I've ever worked with or dedicated in my life.
Wow.
Extraordinarily good. But they're working in all of these systems with legacy systems that were unfunded or ill-funded for 20 or 30 years. And so we blame the people that are there today when the blame really goes for people and politicians who didn't make the investments years ago.
Right.
These are good people in a bad situation, not bad people in a bad situation.
So how do you, with all this extraordinary experience, and I know in the public sector it's a different kettle of fish than private sector, but is there a maxim that sort of we can take away for, like, you're a guy that gets shit done. Like if I was putting a team together, an A team, and I always thought this to myself, like, who would be my A team? There's 10 people, you're one of them.
Thank you.
And it's because there's a set of skills. You almost have developer skills. You know what developer skills are?
Well, I don't tell me, but I've spent enough time around them that I think I could guess. But,
but not in the bad way. Like developers, like I worked with a guy one time. He was a workout guy in bankruptcies and whatever, and he said developers are the type of people that would dig up the bones of their dead mother and sell the bones to buy flowers for a prostitute.
Okay, that's a bit much, but I get the point.
I get the point. And and Trump's a developer. And so I've represented developers, and I've never found one that I was like, wow, this is an honest guy. Like, because
I do tell people, you don't get mad at snakes for having fangs. Why do you get mad at a developer for being greedy about money?
It's just but what I do like about a developer, the qualities of a developer is you fix stuff and you motivate people to do stuff and you produce something and you're dealing with political pressure. You're dealing with NIMBY, you're dealing with money, you're dealing with banks, you're dealing with contractors, you're dealing with drug addicts. I mean, you got to know how to deal with all those things, and that's a skill that takes. You're not born with it; you have to develop it.
No, clearly not born with it. I, like many human beings, would like the world. If I just ran the world, it'd be a lot easier, as most people think. But it's actually over the course of time, and the things I would mention is, I do think that people will say that theater is whatever it is, but they don't view theater as incredibly serious. When as a technician in theater, the curtain goes up at 8. End of sentence. No one cares. Doesn't matter whether your dog died, the electrical system is broke. I have stood behind a stage and I've actually held 240 electrical wires and done this, connecting the wires to make something go live. Like in theater, there are no excuses. Just like the old Tom Hanks, there's no crying in baseball. There's no excuses in theater. And so you really do learn a performance on time, and you learn a structural way of thinking about things. I'd argue most organizations really suffer from a lack of attention to the basics, because most people think in terms of they never think about the water they swim in. They just think about the thing in front of them. They don't think about the context. So many people are just trying to solve the problem, even though the entire system they operate in is screwed up. And so getting people to instead think about how to fix the system and how to think about yourself as part of a system, not I'm perfectly good the way I am. This thing outside me is the problem. So I really think a lot of the work, it comes, you've got to realize over the course of time that working with people and working in groups and getting input is actually valuable, not a problem. You've got to realize that you need to think in a systems way. Mm-hmm. And I do believe that a simple place, the Deming is a management guru. His name was Deming. Yeah. He would be excellent to pay attention to. Louis Fisher's book, Getting to Success, the Harvard Negotiation Project, I think is an extraordinary.
Getting to Yes.
Getting to Yes.
Yeah, I read that. Yeah, Lawrence Ury and Howard. Yeah,
and those sort of pieces I think are very important, but over the course of it, I really think that you've got to respect people from where they are. And as one of my mentors once said, it was about a woman who'd screwed up, and her name was Dolores. And he said, when somebody said to him, why didn't you really come down hard on her? And he said, because she's trying to be the best Dolores she can be. And I think if you start from a place that people are trying their hardest and not succeeding, that is very different than you screwed up. There's another book, I think it's James Coast wrote it, or I think it's his name, but it's Infinite Games, Finite Games, Games Thinkers Play. And the theory of the book is small-minded people view everything as a finite game. At the end of the game, you go, you're a loser, and I won. Complex thinkers realize that there are infinite games and that you need to have everybody save face. And therefore, you need to respect them in the deal. So I think that in terms of this sort of work, whether it's private or public, you need to be really thinking about, and I say this not in some sort of like, I want to give everybody a hug and a pony and make everything better, but you really need to actually care about the person in front of you. If they know you actually care about them, you can ask them to do anything. Mm-hmm. But they need to know that you actually have their interest in heart. And that doesn't mean ruining your own interest or sacrificing yourself or martyrdom or any of these other pieces or giving people false hope. But you really need to, I think, move from a place of respect and engagement with them. And then you can achieve anything as a group.
I think you're right. And that's a perfect way to wrap this up because, again, the name of my podcast is I'll Call My Guy. It's not I Got a Guy that was taken, but it's I'll Call My Guy. And you're one of my guys. And the reason what that means is that you build relationships and friendships with people over the years, and you respect them and you take an interest in them, genuine interest. And that when, I have a podcast and I'm here and I could say, hey, I want to call my guy, come spend it with me or whatever it is. It's not quid pro quo. It's just, you just like people and take a genuine interest in them. I think that's such good advice. And I hope people take that because, right, if you approach it with somebody, whether it is, I'm doing a divorce mediation, whatever it is. And I say, and this is a technique you've learned in mediation classes. I'm here, I'm going to treat you fairly. Yeah. I'm going to treat you fairly. I'm going to do my best. I get more referrals from people on the other side that said, you know what, you represented my wife, but you were decent to me.
No,
that's such a good thing.
When I used to do lawyering and development deals, right, the guy the other side, and interesting, it's often men, when they are totally just all about themselves, you're not going back to them again. You don't want to do a deal with them. It's incredibly painful. It wastes a lot of time. if you start your deal from the point of view of I'm going to do this deal fairly, because that's where most deals are going to land up anyways, and you start there, you create a relationship with the other side. I think it's admirable advice and an admirable approach.
Well, thank you. Well, Dave, listen, thank you so much. I love catching up with you once a year, and I love seeing your stuff online. I love your, again, like we started, I love your prose and the way you do things, and always love keeping in touch. And although, of course, it's always a good face to see here in Provincetown. I love Provincetown, as you know. It's my favorite place. I love the light. I love the people.
I now don't. They say when you start in Provincetown, you start as a visitor, then you become a doctor because you start diagnosing everyone here,
right.
And eventually you wind up as a patient in the asylum.
Yes,
because as Norman Mailer famously said, Provincetown is North America's largest open air asylum.
Am I officially a patient?
No, you're no. At best, you're moving from tourist visitor to doctor. No, I believe I am, after 10 years, I believe I am moving to patient status, in the sense that I really can't conceive living anywhere else.
Oh, it's such an amazing thing.
And it's not just the environment and the beauty we have around us. It is the incredible individuality of the community. And I do say that for the Provincetowns and other places in the coastal places, as much as we all want to be, every American wants to be rich, money kills art, it kills creativity, and it kills individualism. And I do think that places like Provincetown continue to suffer by their own success. If there's something joyous here, it is the individualism.
Well, but I'll end it with this.
Yeah.
My son Rex, who's almost 10 now, when I took him here since he was 3, and I remember he was 3 or 4. I think he was 4 when we came here, and he was looking around, and we were going by the tea dance. I'll never forget it. And I said to him, Rex, what do you love about Provincetown? And this is out of the mouth of babes, right? He says, here people's hearts are happy.
Yeah,
and it's true. And I mean, talk about like a profound thing to say. And it's true, because you walk in the street and you're like, how could you not be happy here?
I go and I tried to live in when I was working at the city, I got an apartment outside of Boston, and I tried to get into the coolest community. And I went to there, and I suddenly saw how negative and depressed they all were. That sense of living on a, Virginia Woolf said, living on a diminishing carpet. And I think in Provincetown, life is just as hard here. Everything is just as lousy or good here, depending on the day. But here, everyone feels incredibly lucky, and you will miss if your enemy gets sick. And everyone in Provincetown has an enemy. If your enemy gets sick, you miss them too, because they're part of your framework. It is an incredibly tight community. I think he's right.
Right. Dave,
thanks.
You're the best. Thank you.
Thank you.